If you open that car door, I go to prison. Nancy's voice shook in the dark back seat. The man standing outside the car didn't look at her with pity. He looked at her with disgust. Security guards were running toward them. She was wearing a stolen golden dress. He was one of the most powerful Korean CEOs in Seoul. And in the next 10 seconds, he would either ruin her life or change it forever. But to understand how a girl like Nancy ended up hiding in a billionaire's back seat, you have to go back to the beginning. Nancy had never asked for much. Not in Seoul. Not anywhere. She just wanted to feel like she belonged somewhere. To someone. Instead, she cleaned floors in the most expensive bridal boutique in Gangnam. Every morning she walked past women in silk and pearls. Women whose biggest problem was choosing between ivory and white. Women whose mothers held their hands while they cried in front of mirrors. Nancy watched all of it, with a mop in her hand and a ring on her finger, because at least she had Daniel. For years, a small apartment in Itaewon. A future he kept promising was just around the corner. She held on to that promise like it was oxygen. She found out on a Wednesday. A photo, sent from an unknown number. Daniel, in a suit, standing at an altar, next to a woman she had never seen. The caption? A union between two powerful families. Nancy called him immediately. He picked up, calm, unbothered, like he had been waiting for this call and already decided it didn't matter. Daniel, who is she? A politician's daughter. Were you with her while? Nancy. His voice was flat. It wasn't going anywhere with us. 4 years. Weren't enough to change what I needed. She felt something collapse inside her chest. So it was always about money. He didn't even flinch. Love doesn't pay rent. She hung up. She sat on the bathroom floor of their apartment. Her apartment now, she supposed, and she waited to cry. The tears didn't come. Just silence. The kind that doesn't feel like peace. It feels like the moment after something breaks, and you're still standing there holding the pieces, not knowing what to do with them. She went back to work the next morning. Because Seoul doesn't stop for heartbreak. And neither do floors that need mopping. She moved through the boutique the same way she always had. Quietly. Carefully. Taking up as little space as possible. Then the delivery arrived. A golden dress. Hand-beaded. Floor length. The kind of dress that made every woman in the room go silent just looking at it. One of the stylists held it up and whispered, "This is the dress that makes a woman feel like she was made to be loved." Nancy stopped, stared, then looked away. Women like her didn't wear dresses like that. She knew it. She'd always known it. But that night, after the last staff member left, after the boutique went dark and quiet, Nancy stood in front of that dress. For a long time. 5 minutes, she told herself. Just 5 minutes. Nobody will know. She slipped it on, turned to the mirror, and for the first time in 4 years, she didn't see the girl who wasn't enough. She saw a woman worth choosing. Her eyes filled, not with sadness, with something she had almost forgotten existed. Hope. Then the lights came on. Security. Torches. Radios. 2 of them. And the look on their faces said everything. Caught. She ran. Out the back. Through the corridor. Down into the parking garage. Heart slamming against her ribs. The golden dress. Still on her body. She couldn't go back. She couldn't explain. She couldn't. A black car. Door slightly open. She got in. Pulled the door shut. Pressed herself into the back seat and stopped breathing. Seconds passed. Then the driver's door opened. He got in without looking back. Tall. Composed. Expensive. He reached for the ignition. And stopped. The air shifted. Slowly, he looked in the rearview mirror. Dark eyes. Sharp. Unreadable. Nancy, in the stolen golden dress, chest heaving, mascara threatening to fall, held his gaze. Outside, security was closing in. Cameras were out, and she had maybe 10 seconds before this man decided her fate. So she said the only thing she could, "If you open that car door," her voice cracked, "I go to prison." He stared at her, cold, calculating. What she saw on his face wasn't pity. It wasn't kindness. It was disgust. And yet, he hadn't opened the door. Yet, it arrived on a Thursday morning. No warning. No announcement. Just a delivery man, a white garment box, and the entire boutique staff going silent the moment the lid came off. Nancy was mopping the far end of the store when she heard it. That particular silence, the kind that meant something beautiful had entered the room. She told herself not to look. She looked anyway. The dress was gold. Not yellow. Not champagne. Not the pale, watered-down gold that designers called gold when they wanted to play it safe. Real gold. Deep and rich and warm, like the last light before sunset hits the Han River and turns everything it touches into something worth staring at. It was floor-length, fitted through the body, then flowing out just below the knee like it understood exactly how a woman was supposed to move. Every inch of it hand-beaded. Tiny intricate details that caught the light and threw it back differently depending on where you stood. It was the kind of dress that didn't just sit on a hanger. It breathed. One of the senior stylists, a woman named Jion who had worked in fashion for 15 years and was not easily impressed by anything, pressed her fingers to her lips and said nothing for a full 10 seconds. Then she whispered, "This is the one." Nancy heard her. She turned back to her mop. The dress went into the display window by noon. By 2 p.m., 3 women had already come in specifically to ask about it after seeing it from outside the mall. By closing time, the boutique manager had received a call from a client offering to pay double the asking price if they would hold it for her daughter's engagement shoot. Nancy heard all of this while she cleaned. She did not allow herself to look at the dress again after that first moment. She was good at that, at deciding not to want things that weren't for her. For years of practice, she wiped down the mirrors, straightened the chairs, collected the empty coffee cups the staff left behind, swept the fitting room corridor. The last person out was Jion, who paused at the door, looked back once at the display window, and said to no one in particular, "A dress like that deserves the right woman." Then she left, and Nancy was alone. She stood in the empty boutique for a moment, just standing, mop handle in her grip, the hum of the city outside, the soft glow of the display lights still on, because someone always forgot to switch them off, and Nancy always did it herself before she left. She walked toward the window to hit the switch, and she stopped, right in front of the dress. Up close it was even more devastating. She could see the individual beads now, could see the hours, weeks, of someone's hands working over it, could see the way the fabric moved even in stillness, like it was alive. A dress like that deserves the right woman. Nancy's hand reached out. "Don't." Her fingers touched the fabric. It was softer than anything she had ever felt. She stood there, breathing, thinking about Daniel standing at an altar with a politician's daughter while Nancy worked late shifts in other women's wedding dreams. Thinking about 4 years of being quiet, careful, small. Thinking about the way she had looked at that first photo and felt nothing. Not because it didn't hurt, but because some part of her had already accepted that this was simply what happened to women like her. Love doesn't pay rent. 5 minutes, she thought. The store is empty. The cameras are on a loop during closing. Everyone knows the system glitches after 8 p.m. No one will see. No one will know. 5 minutes of being someone else. 5 minutes of feeling like I was made for something beautiful. She unzipped the back. Her hands were shaking. She told her hands to stop. They didn't listen. She carried the dress to the fitting room at the end of the corridor, the big one, the one with the tall mirror and the good lighting that they saved for VIP clients. She changed quickly, like if she slowed down she would lose her nerve. And then she turned around. The woman in the mirror was a stranger. Nancy stood completely still, staring. She had seen herself in mirrors every day for 26 years. She knew her face, knew the particular way tiredness settled under her eyes on long days, knew the way she carried her shoulders slightly forward, like she was always bracing for something. But the woman in the mirror wasn't bracing. She was standing. The gold against her dark skin wasn't a contrast, it was a conversation. Like the dress had been waiting for exactly this. Like someone, somewhere, had beaded each tiny detail with a woman exactly like Nancy in mind, and all those other women who had tried it on today had simply been the wrong answer. Her hand came up slowly to touch her own collarbone. The woman in the mirror did the same. This is what it feels like, Nancy thought. This is what it feels like to look like you matter. Her throat tightened, not with sadness. She had expected sadness. Instead what came was something older and more dangerous. Longing. The kind that starts somewhere behind your ribs and moves upward until it sits in the back of your throat and makes it almost impossible to swallow. She wanted this, not the dress. She wanted what the dress made her feel. Chosen. Seen. Worth something. Her eyes filled. One tear. Then two. She blinked them back hard, because she was not going to cry in a stolen dress in an empty boutique like some tragic figure in a story she didn't even want to be in anymore. She squared her shoulders. The woman in the mirror squared hers back. There she is, Nancy thought. There's the woman Daniel was supposed to see. The lights came on. All of them, flooding the fitting room corridor in one violent burst of white. Nancy's heart stopped. Security check. Is anyone still in the building? A man's voice. Official. Bored in the way people are bored when they're sure the answer is no. Nancy did not breathe. Hello! Footsteps. Coming down the corridor. Toward her. She looked at herself in the mirror one last time. Gold dress, bare feet. Eyes wide with the specific terror of someone who made one small desperate choice and is now watching it become a catastrophe in real time. The fitting room door handle moved. Nancy grabbed her clothes off the bench, shoved her feet into her shoes without untying them and ran. She hit the fire exit at the back of the store at full speed. The alarm didn't go off. It never worked. She knew that. She'd reported it twice, and she spilled out into the service corridor behind the boutique, still clutching her uniform in one hand and her phone in the other. Hey, HEY! They'd seen her. She ran. Down the corridor. Left at the junction. Through the door marked staff, only that led to the mall's lower parking garage. The cold air hit her like a wall. Her shoes, flat canvas things, not made for running, slapped against the concrete. Behind her, radios crackled. Female. African. Mid-20s, wearing the... She stopped listening. She just ran. The parking garage was a maze of black and gray and the smell of exhaust and concrete. Her lungs were burning. Somewhere above her, she could hear the mall's internal alarm system starting its slow, lazy wail. Not urgent enough to alert the whole building, just enough to bring every security guard within 3 floors down to this level. She ducked behind a pillar, pressed her back against it, looked down at herself. She was still wearing the dress. She hadn't even thought about it. She'd just run, and now she was standing in a parking garage in a 40 million won golden gown like the world's most overdressed fugitive. She could hear voices now. 2 different directions. They were spreading out. She looked around desperately. A white van, 2 exposed. The doors were locked. A motorbike, useless. A pillar, another pillar, a row of luxury cars. One of them had a door that wasn't fully closed. A black Genesis G90. New model. The kind of car that cost more than most people's apartments. Tinted windows. The backseat door on the passenger side sitting open maybe 2 centimeters, just enough to see the interior light hadn't triggered. Nancy looked left, looked right, and made the worst decision of her life. She eased the door open just enough to slide in, pulled it shut behind her, dropped down below the window line, pressing herself into the footwell of the back seat, uniform still bundled in her arms, the golden dress pooling around her like she'd fallen into a dream she had no business being in. She pressed her hand over her mouth, controlled her breathing. In. Out. Slow. Slow. Outside she could hear footsteps. A torch sweeping across the cars. Check the east exit. Already on it. She can't have gone far in that dress. The footsteps passed. Moved away. Nancy's eyes closed. Okay, she thought. Okay. Give it 5 minutes. Let them spread out. Then slip out, find a stairwell, change clothes, walk out the front entrance like a normal human being who did not just commit a crime. 5 minutes. She could do 5 minutes. She lasted 3. Because at 3 minutes and 12 seconds, the driver's door opened. Nancy went completely rigid. She heard him before she saw him. The sound of someone who moved with absolute certainty. No hesitation, no fumbling for keys, no pause at the door. Just the clean, controlled motion of a man who had never once in his life been unsure of where he was going. He got in. The door closed. The car filled with the scent of something dark and expensive, cedar, maybe, and something colder underneath it. The kind of cologne that didn't announce itself but simply existed in the air around certain men like a second skin. He reached for the ignition and stopped. The silence lasted exactly 2 seconds. Then, very slowly, he looked up into the rearview mirror. Nancy's breath had turned to glass in her throat. He was Korean. Late 30s, maybe. Sharp jaw, sharper eyes, the kind of dark that didn't just look at you but assessed you, the way a man looks at something when he's already deciding what it's worth and whether it's worth his time. He was still in his suit, tie still straight. Not a single thing about him suggested the day had touched him. He looked at her the way you look at something you didn't order that arrived on your doorstep anyway. He didn't speak. Nancy opened her mouth. What came out was not the explanation she had prepared, not the apology she was building, not any of the words she had been frantically assembling in the 30 seconds since the door opened. What came out was the truth. Quiet. Shaking. Stripped of everything except the raw and simple terror underneath it. If you open that car door... Her voice cracked. I go to prison. He stared at her. 1 second. 2. 3. And what moved across his face was not the shock she expected. Not confusion. Not even curiosity. It was something much colder than all of those. Disgust. The clean, undisguised disgust of a man who had spent a lifetime watching people try to get close to him by any means available and had just watched a woman climb into his car in a stolen dress and look up at him with shaking eyes like this was somehow his problem to fix. His jaw tightened. His hand moved back toward the door. Outside, getting closer now, the sound of security radios. The sweep of a torch across the windshield. Voices. Check the black Genesis. His hand stopped. Nancy watched his eyes move to the mirror. Watched him calculate. Watched him do the particular mathematics of a man who understands exactly what his face appearing in a scandal means for his stock price, his board, his quarterly review. He looked back at her. The disgust was still there. But underneath it now, something else. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at her. The way you look at something that has landed in your lap uninvited and you are trying to decide, with as little energy as possible, how to remove it. Nancy stayed exactly where she was, pressed into the footwell of his back seat, golden dress crushed around her, both hands gripping her bundled uniform like it was the only real thing left in her life. Which, at this point, it might have been. His name was Kwon Seo-jun. She didn't know that yet. All she knew was that he was tall, even sitting, she could tell, and that his suit was the kind that didn't come off a rack, and that his eyes, dark and perfectly still in the rearview mirror, had not moved from her face since the moment he'd found her. He had the look of a man who was accustomed to people wanting things from him, and accustomed to being right about why. Get out! 2 words. Quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't need volume because it already has weight. Nancy's stomach dropped. Please. I said get out of my car. If I get out they'll arrest me. That, he said, is not my concern. He turned then, properly turned, one arm over the back of the passenger seat, and looked at her directly for the first time. Up close it was worse. His face was the kind of face that had never in its life been unsure of anything. Clean lines. A jaw that looked like it had been drawn by someone with an agenda. Eyes that didn't just look at you. They filed you away under whatever category they'd already decided you belonged in before you'd opened your mouth. Right now, the category he had filed Nancy under was not a generous one. She could see it. The way his gaze moved from her face to the dress to her hands to the bundled clothes she was holding and then back to her face. And the way all of it assembled into a single, clear conclusion behind his eyes. I know exactly what this is. How long have you been in here? He asked. How long? 3 minutes. Maybe 4. I didn't know whose car this was. I just needed somewhere to. You needed somewhere. He repeated it back to her flatly. You needed somewhere. So you chose my car. The door was open. The door was open, he said again. Same flat tone, like he was reading from a script he found deeply unimpressive. And you just happened to be wearing that dress. Nancy looked down at herself. The golden dress. Still on her body. Still breathtaking. Still 40 million one of evidence against her. It's not what it looks like. He made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. A single short exhale through his nose. A woman in a stolen dress hiding in my car. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Tell me what exactly does it look like, so I can tell you what it actually looks like. I work in the boutique. I'm a cleaner. I I tried it on, I wasn't going to take it. I panicked when security came and You panicked? Yes. Into my car. I didn't know it was your car. But here you are. His eyes hadn't moved. In my car. In a dress that isn't yours. Telling me a story. Nancy's jaw tightened. She understood what he was doing. She understood what he thought she was. Some desperate woman who had engineered this. The dress, the car, all of it. To land herself in the back seat of a rich man with nowhere to go but toward him. She wanted to tell him he was wrong. That she was not that woman. That she had never in her entire life tried to use anyone for anything. That she had spent 4 years being the most undemanding, uncomplaining, unneedy person she knew and still ended up abandoned for a senator's daughter. That the last thing she wanted, the absolute last thing, was to be here in his car, needing something from a man she didn't know. She wanted to say all of that. Instead what came out was, I know what you think. Do you? You think I planned this? He didn't confirm it. He didn't need to. The answer was already sitting plainly on his face. You need to get out of my car, he said. Now. Before I open this door myself. His hand moved to the door handle. And that was the exact moment the torchlight hit the windshield. 3 beams. From 3 different directions. Radios crackling. Voices. Closer now. Organized now. The scattered search becoming a net that was closing in on this exact row of this exact parking level. Black Genesis G90. Check the plates. Got eyes on the vehicle. Movin'. Kwon Seojin's hand stopped on the door handle. Nancy watched his eyes lift to the windshield. Watched him take in the torches. The guards. The 2 men, already walking toward the car from the left. The one coming around the rear. And then, and this was the part she would replay for weeks afterward, she watched his gaze move 2 degrees to the right. Where a security guard had his phone out. Not his radio. His phone. Camera up. Already recording. Nancy understood then what she had stumbled into. This wasn't just a man in an expensive car. This was someone whose face was a liability. She could see it, the calculation happening behind his eyes in real time. Fast and cold and ruthless, the way powerful people make decisions. Not because they're heartless, but because they have learned that hesitation is more dangerous than the wrong choice. His face on camera. His face in a parking garage. His face next to a woman in a stolen dress with security closing in from 3 sides. By morning it would be trending. By afternoon his board would be calling. By the end of the week the stock would have moved in a direction no one wanted. She could see all of that happening in the space between his eyes and the windshield. 3 seconds. Maybe less. He moved. Not out of the car. Toward her. Nancy barely had time to process it. 1 second he was in the front seat, and then he was turning, reaching back, his hand closing around her wrist with a grip that was firm but not rough, and he was pulling her forward, up onto the back seat properly, out of the footwell, and his other hand was... He straightened her. 1 sharp, decisive motion. Pulled her upright on the seat beside him, and turned her, so she was facing the window. His arm came around her shoulder. Not gently. Not warmly. Like a man putting a piece on a board. Don't speak, he said quietly, directly into her ear. Don't move. Do exactly what I do. What are you? I said don't speak. He rolled down the window. The security guard reached the car first. Mid-40s. Stocky. The look of a man who had been doing this job long enough to be tired but not long enough to stop caring. His torch swept the interior of the car. Found Nancy immediately. His whole body changed, the slight forward lean of someone who has just located what they were looking for. Sir, I apologize for the disturbance. We're looking for a woman who... He stopped, because Kwon Seojin was looking at him with the specific expression of a man who has been mildly inconvenienced by someone significantly beneath him on every conceivable axis of power and is deciding how much patience to spend on the interaction. You're looking for someone, Seojin said. Not a question. A statement, delivered with the kind of measured calm that made the guard's torch lower 3 inches without him seeming to notice he'd done it. Yes, sir, a woman. She was seen leaving the boutique on level 4 with... The guard's torch came up again. Found Nancy. Found the dress. Found the dress. His mouth opened, and Seojun said, with absolute, unblinking calm, She's my fiancée. The words dropped into the air like stones into still water. Nancy felt them hit her somewhere in the center of her chest. She did not move. She did not breathe. She stared straight ahead at the middle distance and performed, with everything she had, the face of a woman who was exactly where she was supposed to be. The guard blinked. I'm sorry, sir, the boutique reported a theft of the dress. Siajan's voice was patient in the way that contains zero actual patience. I purchased the dress this afternoon. My assistant arranged it through the manager. If there has been a miscommunication on the boutique's end, I suggest you take it up with them directly rather than harassing my fiancé in a parking garage. The guard looked at Nancy. Nancy looked back at him. She kept her face neutral, slightly bored. The face of a woman who was tired and wanted to go home and found this entire situation mildly beneath her. She had no idea where that face came from. Somewhere desperate, probably. The guard's torch moved between them. Seo-jun didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't do anything except sit there radiating the specific energy of a man who was already mentally composing a complaint to the mall's management about this interaction and was deciding whether to deliver it himself or have his legal team do it. 2 more guards arrived at the car. One of them looked at his phone, looked at Seo-jun's face, looked back at his phone. Nancy watched the man's expression change. Recognition, then alarm. The guard leaned toward his colleague and said something low and fast that Nancy couldn't hear, but she saw the colleague's posture shift immediately, that particular stiffening of someone who has just been told they are standing next to a problem they do not want to be standing next to. The first guard cleared his throat. I apologize, sir. I wasn't aware. Please forgive the intrusion. We'll verify with the boutique manager right away. You do that, Seo-jun said, already rolling the window up. The guard stepped back. Phones went down. The torches swept away. Voices shifted from close in to stand down, and Nancy watched from the corner of her eye as the net that had been closing around her simply dissolved. Men who had been moving with purpose 30 seconds ago were now finding other directions to look. Radios crackling with apologies to a manager somewhere upstairs. And then there was nothing. Just the parking garage. And the 2 of them. Seo-jun's arm dropped from her shoulder. He moved back to the front seat smoothly, like none of that had happened, like he performed minor social miracles on Tuesday evenings as a matter of routine. For a moment neither of them spoke. Nancy became aware of the sound of her own heartbeat. Then he said, without turning around, "Don't mistake that for kindness." His voice was back to what it had been before. Flat, even, stripped of every performance it had just delivered. "I did that for me, not for you." Nancy said nothing. "If my face trends online, my stock drops 4% by morning. My board convenes an emergency call. My quarter gets derailed. A pause. I will not allow a woman I've never met to cost me 4% of my company because she made poor decisions in a boutique." Nancy stared at the back of his seat. "So what happens now?" she asked. He turned then, just enough to look at her over his shoulder. "Now," he said, "you have a choice." She waited. "You'll play along, for as long as is necessary. Public appearances, whatever is required to make the story hold." His eyes didn't waver. "Or I roll that window back down and call them over myself." "You wouldn't." "I already did you one favor tonight." His voice was calm. "Don't test whether I'll do another." Nancy looked at him, at the absolute, unmoving certainty in his face, at the complete absence of any warmth whatsoever. She thought about the holding cell she'd seen once when a friend of hers got picked up for something small and stupid and had spent 48 hours in a room with fluorescent lighting that never turned off. She thought about her mother in Lagos, who sent voice notes every Sunday and always ended them the same way. "Stay safe, my daughter. Stay out of trouble. Make me proud." She thought about the dress, about the woman she had seen in the mirror, about how quickly beautiful things became evidence. "Fine," she said. Something shifted in his expression. Not warmth, not satisfaction exactly. Just the small settling of a man who had made a calculation and found out he was right. He turned back to face the front. "My assistant will contact you tomorrow with details. You don't even know my name. I'll know everything about you by morning." He said it the way other people said the sky is blue. Simply, without cruelty. Just fact. Name, address, employment history. Why you put on a dress that didn't belong to you? Nancy's jaw tightened. And if you don't like what you find? The car started. Then our engagement will be very short, he said. Get out. She got out, stood in the cold parking garage in the golden dress, and watched the black Genesis pull out of the space and disappear around the corner without hesitation. No second look. No acknowledgement. Just gone. Nancy stood there for a long moment. The dress caught the fluorescent light of the garage and threw it back, warm and impossible and completely out of place. She looked down at herself. Fiancé. She had become someone's fiancé in the time it took a man to roll down a window and tell a single, effortless lie. Not because he wanted her. Not because she wanted him. Because his stock price was more important than her freedom, and her freedom was more important than her pride. She should have felt humiliated. She told herself she felt humiliated. What she actually felt, underneath the fear, underneath the shock, underneath the very reasonable voice in her head saying, "Nancy, what have you done?" was something she did not have a name for yet. She took the dress off in a bathroom stall on the 3rd floor, changed back into her uniform, folded the golden dress carefully, more carefully than it probably deserved, and left it on the shelf inside the boutique service entrance before she went home. Not thrown, not abandoned, folded, like it still mattered, like she was still, somewhere underneath everything, the woman who had stood in front of that mirror and seen something worth protecting. She went home. She sat on the edge of her bed. Her side, the small side, the side she had never managed to stop defaulting to even after Daniel left, and she stared at the wall. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text. 7 words. Be ready. 9 a.m. Someone will find you. She read it twice, put the phone face down on the mattress, and sat with a specific, bone-deep knowledge that her life had just changed, completely, irrevocably, in a direction she had not chosen and could not yet see the end of. All because of a dress. All because for 5 minutes she had wanted to feel like she was worth something. The car arrived at 9 a.m. exactly. Not a minute early. Not a minute late. A black vehicle, different from the Genesis, this one longer, quieter, with a driver who got out and opened the door without being asked and did not make eye contact with Nancy once during the entire 40-minute drive to Songbukdong. She had not slept. She had spent the night sitting on the edge of her bed going through every possible version of what the next 24 hours could look like and finding something wrong with all of them. She had packed one bag, not because she knew how long this would last, because one bag was all she had that was worth packing. The building didn't look like what she expected. She had expected glass and steel and something aggressively modern, the kind of architecture that exists purely to communicate wealth to people walking past on the street. Instead, it was quieter than that. Older. A residential tower in a tree-lined street, understated in the way that things are understated when they don't need to prove anything to anyone. The kind of building that didn't have a sign out front because the people who needed to know about it already knew. The driver carried her bag to the lobby without being asked. A woman was waiting there. Late 20s. Neat. The kind of put-together that suggested she had been awake since 5 and had opinions about people who hadn't. She looked at Nancy the way you look at a variable that has been introduced into a previously clean equation. Ms. Nancy. Not a question. Yes. I'm Cheon, Mr. Kwan's personal assistant. A pause, just long enough to be intentional. I'll show you upstairs. The penthouse took up the entire top floor. Nancy stepped out of the private elevator and stopped moving. She had clean luxury spaces before. She understood, in a practical sense, that some people live differently. She had mopped the floors of boutiques and wiped down the surfaces of VIP rooms and learned not to be visibly affected by the gap between those spaces and the one she went home to. But this was different. It wasn't the size, though it was large. It wasn't the view, though floor-to-ceiling windows framed Seoul in a way that made the city look like it had been arranged specifically for this vantage point. It was the quiet, the specific, cushioned quiet of a space that had been designed to hold one person and had organized itself entirely around that person's preferences. Everything was in its exact right place. Nothing was excessive. Nothing was decorative in the way that suggested someone was trying to impress. It was simply correct, like a man who knew precisely what he wanted and had never once compromised on any of it. Nancy stood in the entrance holding her one bag. Chan watched her. Your room is this way. The room was bigger than her apartment. She did not say that out loud. She set her bag down on the floor next to the bed, a bed that was large enough that sleeping in the middle of it would have felt like a geographical decision, and she stood very still and breathed. Through the wall, she could hear the low sound of movement. Staff! More than one. The penthouse had a housekeeper, she realized. A cook. Chan herself moved in and out of the space with the ease of someone who had long ago been granted access and knew exactly where the edges of that access were. They all looked at Nancy. Not rudely, not openly, but she caught it. The glances exchanged over her head, the slight pause before a response, the way conversations shifted when she entered a room. She was used to being looked at like she didn't belong somewhere. She had just never been looked at like that while standing inside it. Seo-jun was not there when she arrived. Cheon informed her of this without being asked, in the tone of someone managing a schedule rather than delivering news. Mr. Kwon has meetings until this evening. He asks that you stay in the penthouse today. There will be a stylist arriving at 2 o'clock. A stylist? For appropriate clothing. Cheon's eyes moved to Nancy's bag on the floor, then back up. For the public appearances? Nancy nodded. After Cheon left, she sat on the edge of the bed. Just the edge. Her feet flat on the floor. Her hands in her lap. She did not lie back. Did not spread out. Did not touch the pillows, or pull back the covers to feel the thread count, or open the drawers to see what was in them. She sat on the edge and waited, the way she always had. At 11 that morning, Cheon sat down at the desk in her office adjacent to the penthouse and opened a new file. Okafor Nancy, 26 years old. Nigerian Korean. Born in Lagos, moved to Seoul at 19 on a student visa, transitioned to a work permit 3 years later. Currently employed as a cleaning staff member at Hanuel Bridal Boutique, Gangnam Branch. Previously employed at 2 similar establishments. No criminal record. No outstanding debt beyond a standard monthly phone bill and a small amount owed to a mutual savings group among friends. One relationship of note, a Kim Dae-yeol, recently married to the daughter of a National Assembly member. The relationship had ended, based on available information, approximately 6 days ago. No family in Seoul. Mother in Lagos. 2 younger brothers in university. Cheon read through the file twice. Then she printed it, walked it to Seo-jun's home office, and left it on his desk without a note. He would understand. He always understood. He came home at 8. Nancy heard the elevator before she heard him, the soft mechanical sound of it arriving, then the doors, then footsteps that were unhurried but covered ground, quickly. She was in the living room. She had spent most of the day trying to occupy as little space as possible in a penthouse that kept offering her space she didn't know what to do with. She had eaten the meal the cook left for her at the kitchen counter rather than the dining table. She had stood at the window for a while and looked at Seoul and felt very far from every version of her life she recognized. The stylist had come and gone, leaving behind a wardrobe's worth of clothing that Nancy had thanked her for politely and not yet opened. When Seo-jun walked in, he looked exactly as he had the night before. Tie still straight, jacket still on, the day sitting nowhere on his face. He glanced at her, then at the kitchen counter, where the evidence of her solitary dinner was visible. He said nothing about it. Cheon briefed you on tomorrow. She said there's an event. A dinner. Associates. It will last 3 hours. You'll be introduced as my fiancé. You'll say little. If anyone asks how we met, we were introduced through a mutual contact 6 months ago. He moved to his office as he spoke, jacket coming off, folded over his arm. Cheon will prepare talking points. Talking points, Nancy repeated. For the performance. He disappeared into his office. The door didn't close fully. Nancy looked at the space where he had been standing. The performance. Right. She learned his patterns the way she had learned the patterns of every space she'd ever worked in. Quietly, carefully, without being asked to. He woke early. She heard movement before 6 every morning. He did not eat breakfast at the table. He took coffee in his office, standing, before the day officially started. He was home by 8 most evenings, and by 9 the penthouse was silent. He was not unkind. He was also not kind. He existed in that precise middle space, professional, functional, correct, that left no opening for anything personal to enter. He did not ask her how she was. She did not offer. They shared the penthouse the way two people share an elevator, aware of each other, managing the awareness, relieved when the doors opened. But he noticed things. She was sure he did, even when his face showed nothing. On the third day, she reached for one of the decorative objects on the living room shelf, a small celadon vase, jade green and obviously old, and stopped herself before she touched it. Put her hand back at her side. She caught him watching from across the room. He didn't comment. On the fourth night, she fell asleep sitting up against the headboard with the bedside light still on, woke at 2 a.m. to find the light had been switched off, not by her. She didn't ask. He didn't explain. On the fifth morning, Chan was running through schedule logistics at the kitchen counter, and Nancy said I'm sorry 3 times in a 4-minute conversation, once for asking a question, once for standing in the way of the coffee machine, once for no discernible reason at all. Chan didn't react. But from the hallway, where he was passing with his phone in his hand and no apparent reason to slow down, Seojun slowed down. Just for a moment. Just long enough that Nancy, if she had turned around, would have seen him looking at her with an expression that was not disgust and not warmth, but something in between that he had not yet put a name to. Then he kept walking. It was the 6th night when it happened. Nancy was in the living room after dinner, sitting at the far end of the couch with her legs folded under her, doing the things she did when she wanted to feel normal, scrolling through videos on her phone with the sound low, the kind of idle watching that was less about seeing and more about having somewhere to put your eyes. Seojun came in. He did not go to his office. He sat down. Not close. The other end of the couch, the length of a careful distance between them. He had a glass of something dark and was looking at the city through the window. For a while neither of them spoke. This had become, without either of them deciding it, the least uncomfortable version of being in the same room. Silence that wasn't hostile, just inhabited. Then he said, without looking at her, "Why that dress?" Nancy's scrolling stopped. She looked at him. He was still facing the window, glass in hand. The city spread out behind him in layers of light. "The golden dress," he said. "Why that one? Why that night?" She was quiet for a moment. She thought about giving him the short version, the practical version. "It was beautiful, and I made a stupid decision, and I'm sorry." She looked at his profile, at the absolute stillness of a man who asked questions because he wanted the actual answer and not because he was making conversation. So she gave him the truth. "I found out my fiancé married someone else," she said. 6 days before I got into your car." He turned slightly, not fully, just enough that she was in his peripheral vision. "I'd been with him for 4 years. I thought we were." She stopped. Restarted. "He told me love doesn't pay rent. He said it like it was obvious. Like I should have already known that, and was embarrassing myself by not knowing it." Seojun said nothing. "I went back to work the next morning because I didn't know what else to do. And the dress arrived, and everyone kept saying it was the dress that makes a woman feel like she was made to be loved." Her voice stayed level. She was proud of that. "And I'd spent 4 years being someone who was very careful not to want things that weren't for me. I was good at it. I never asked for too much. I never took up too much space. I apologized for things that weren't my fault, and I waited and I made myself small and easy and—" She stopped, looked at her hands, and he still left. "So I don't know what I was being careful for." The city hummed distantly beyond the glass. After closing, I was alone in the boutique, and the dress was just there. And I thought, 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes. She exhaled slowly. So I put it on. And I looked in the mirror. And she looked up at him. He had turned fully now, was looking at her directly. No assessment in it this time. No calculation. Just attention. The rare, complete kind. "For 5 minutes," she said quietly. "I didn't feel invisible." The room was very still. Seojun looked at her. Nancy held his gaze because she was done, she decided, with looking away from things. She watched something move through his expression, not quickly, not dramatically, but with the slow and inevitable quality of a tide. Something shifting underneath the surface of a face that had been trained for years not to shift. He had called her a desperate woman. He had looked at her with disgust in a rearview mirror and calculated what she was worth in terms of his quarterly report and decided she was a problem to be managed. He had been so certain. He was looking at her now with an expression that said, very clearly, that certainty was no longer the word he would use. What he was seeing, Nancy did not know this yet, could not have known it yet, was not a gold digger. Not an opportunist. Not a woman who had climbed into his car with a plan. He was seeing someone who had been made small by the people who should have chosen her and had stolen 5 minutes of feeling like herself and had been running ever since. He recognized something in that. Not because his life looked anything like hers, but because there are certain kinds of loneliness that don't care about the size of the apartment you come home to. He looked away first, back to the window, took a slow sip from his glass, and said nothing, because there was nothing in his vocabulary, yet, for what he had just felt. Nancy looked back at her phone. The screen had gone dark. She didn't turn it back on. She sat with her legs folded under her on the far end of his couch, in his penthouse, in the city that had never fully decided whether it wanted her or not, and she breathed. Outside, Seoul blazed and hummed and moved without stopping, the way it always did, the way it always would. And in the quiet of the penthouse, something changed. Not loudly, not with any announcement. Just the way a door that has been closed for a long time will sometimes, for no particular reason, come slightly open. It started with a photograph. Nancy didn't know that at first. She found out the way she found out most things in Seojin's world. Not directly, not from him, but from the shift in atmosphere. The way Chaeyeon's movements became slightly more clipped. The way the penthouse phone rang twice before 8 in the morning on a Tuesday. The way Seo-jun came out of his office at noon, looked at Nancy across the living room with an expression she couldn't read, and then went back in without saying anything. Something had changed. She just didn't know yet that the thing that had changed was her. The photograph was from the parking garage. One of the security guards. Not the senior one, a younger one. Someone who had recognized Seojin's face on his phone screen and understood, with the instinct of someone who had grown up watching business news with his father, that what he was looking at had value. Had not put his phone away when he was supposed to. He had sold it 3 days later. Not to a news outlet. Not directly. To a man named Park Hyun-woo, who was the kind of person who collected information the way other people collected art. Not because he loved it, but because value appreciates when you hold it long enough and release it at the right moment. Park Hyun-woo was also, specifically, the deputy chairman of the board of Seojin's largest competitor. The photograph showed Nancy in the back seat of the Genesis. Golden dress. Seojin's arm around her shoulder. The angle was bad, taken through the windshield from the left, slightly blurred, but it was enough. More than enough. Because Park Hyun-woo didn't just have a photograph. He had a name, and a name was all you needed to build a case. Nancy Okafor. Foreign national. Work permit, not citizenship. Employed as cleaning staff. No significant assets. No family connections in Korea. And this was the part that mattered. Currently under review by the boutique's management for the unauthorized removal of a 40 million won designer gown from their premises on the evening of the 14th. No formal charges filed yet. Yet, Park Hyun-woo read the file that his investigators prepared and smiled the smile of a man who has been waiting for leverage and has just been handed something better than he expected. He made 2 calls. The first was to 3 members of Kwon Seojin's board. The second was to a journalist he kept on retainer for situations exactly like this one. Nancy heard it from Chaeyeon. Not the full version. Not all at once. But she was in the kitchen at 7 in the morning when Chaeyeon walked in with her tablet and her clipped voice and said, without meeting Nancy's eyes, "There may be some press attention today. Mr. Kwon asks that you don't leave the penthouse." What kind of press attention? A pause. The photograph from the boutique parking garage has been obtained by outside parties. Nancy put down her coffee. Who? We're looking into that. Chaeyeon. The assistant looked at her. Just briefly. Long enough for Nancy to see something in her face that wasn't quite pity and wasn't quite apology, but lived somewhere between the two. "Mr. Kwon will speak to you this evening," she said. "Please stay inside." She left. Nancy stood in the kitchen in the quiet and felt the walls begin, very slowly, to move inward. The board meeting was at 2. Nancy didn't know this. She knew something was happening because the penthouse phone rang 4 times between noon and 1:30, and each time Seojin's voice from behind the office door became incrementally quieter and more controlled, which she had learned was the opposite of a good sign. Quiet and controlled meant something was costing him significant effort to contain. At 1:45, Chan knocked on the office door and was admitted immediately. She was inside for 11 minutes. When she came out, her face was professionally blank in a way that took visible effort. At 2 o'clock, Seo Jun left without telling Nancy where he was going. She watched the elevator doors close and spent the next 3 hours sitting with the particular company of someone who knows a storm is coming and has been asked to wait inside while other people decide how bad it will be. She didn't mean to listen. That was the truth, and she knew it was a truth that sounded exactly like the kind of thing someone who had meant to listen would say. But she had been in the living room when they came back. She had not heard the elevator. She'd had the shower running, the water just turned off, and she'd stepped out into the hallway towel dry and quiet, and the voices from Seojin's office were already happening before she had time to make a decision about them. She should have gone back to her room. She knows that. Instead, she stood in the hallway and listened. There were two voices she didn't recognize and then Seojin's. The unfamiliar voices first. The board's position is clear. The woman is a liability. The photograph alone is damaging, but the theft charge. There's no charge. Seojin's voice. Not yet. Park's people will push the boutique to file. They have enough to make it formal within the week if we don't move first. Silence. The Shin family has been patient. Shin Yuna is. I know who Shin Yuna is. She's the right choice. Her family's connection to the ministry alone would offset everything that's happened. One announcement, and this whole situation becomes irrelevant. Another silence. Longer this time. Then the second unfamiliar voice, quieter, more careful. Seojin SSI. The girl needs to go. You know that. Whether you do it quietly, or whether Park does it loudly, is the only decision left to make. And then, this was the part that stopped Nancy's breathing entirely. Seo Jun said nothing. He didn't argue. He didn't deny it. He just let the sentence sit there, unchallenged, in the air of his office, and said, very quietly, "Give me tonight." She didn't hear the rest. She walked back to her room with her hands very steady and her chest doing something she didn't have a word for, not breaking, exactly. Something more structural than that. The way a building doesn't fall all at once but develops, quietly, the cracks that decide its future. The girl needs to go. Give me tonight. She sat on the edge of the bed. Her side. Always her side. She thought about the way he had listened to her 6 nights ago. The way he had turned to face her. Fully turned. The way he didn't turn for anything that didn't deserve his complete attention. She thought about for 5 minutes I didn't feel invisible, and the look on his face afterward, the thing that had moved through him that she had let herself believe was the beginning of something. You were wrong, she told herself. You were always wrong about this. He took a calculation and let you sit in it for a week, and now the calculation has changed, and that's all this ever was. She should have known. She had known. She had walked into this with clear eyes. She had told herself at every step that she understood what this was, and she had understood. Right up until the moment she'd sat on his couch in the dark and told him the truest thing she'd said out loud in years and watched something in his face respond to it. That was the moment she stopped being careful. That was the mistake. She packed her bag. One bag. The same one she'd arrived with. She left everything Chan's stylist had brought. Hung it back in the wardrobe in the same careful order she'd found it. She took only what was hers. There wasn't much. The golden dress was there. She hadn't asked why it was here. It had appeared 2 days after she arrived, hanging in the wardrobe in a clear garment bag, and she had not touched it and not asked about it because some things you don't ask about when you're not sure you want the answer. She took it out now. Held it for a moment. It was lighter than she remembered. Softer. She thought about the woman in the mirror. The one who had stood straight and looked back at herself like she had somewhere to be. She folded the dress. Carefully. The way you fold something you respect. The way she'd left it on the shelf of the service entrance that first night. Not abandoned. Just returned to a world it belonged to more than she did. She laid it at the foot of the bed. Then she sat down and wrote the note. She didn't plan what she was going to say. She just picked up the pen from the bedside table. His pen. Expensive. The kind that wrote too smoothly. And wrote the thing that was sitting at the very top of everything she felt. 8 words. Thank you for pretending I was worth something. She read it back once. Didn't change it. Placed it on top of the dress. It was 4 in the morning. The penthouse was completely silent. She picked up her bag, slipped on her shoes, and walked to the elevator without turning any lights on. She knew the layout well enough by now. She'd cleaned enough spaces in her life to know them in the dark. The elevator arrived without a sound. She stepped in. The doors closed. And for a moment, one moment, between floors, in the small lit box of the elevator, she let herself feel it. All of it. The whole accumulated weight of the past week, the past 4 years, the past 26 years of being a woman who tried to take up the right amount of space and kept finding out it was still somehow too much, or not enough, or the wrong kind entirely. She felt it. She didn't cry. She was done, she decided, with crying in small spaces over men who hadn't chosen her. The lobby was empty. The night doorman was at his desk, half watching a screen, and he looked up when she appeared and blinked at her with a mild confusion of someone processing an unexpected variable at 4 in the morning. She smiled at him. She was good at that, smiling when things were terrible. She had been doing it her whole life. "Good night," she said. He nodded slowly. "Good night, Mississippi." Outside, Sol was doing what Sol did at 4 in the morning. Not sleeping, exactly, but breathing differently. Quieter. The particular quality of a city between its own heartbeats. She stood on the pavement outside the building. Cold air. The smell of coming rain. She pulled out her phone and opened the app for the night bus. 12 minutes. She would stand here for 12 minutes, and then she would get on a bus and go back to her apartment in 81, and she would figure out, methodically and alone, what came next. The boutique. She would have to deal with the boutique. The photograph. She would have to deal with whatever Park Hyunwoo intended to do with it. She would deal with all of it. By herself. The way she had dealt with everything by herself. The way she was always going to have to. Upstairs, in the penthouse, the office was dark. Seo-jun sat at his desk. He had not gone to sleep. He had sat with his board's words for 3 hours and done the kind of thinking he did best. Clear, systematic, emotionally evacuated, and he had almost convinced himself that "give me tonight" meant he was simply allowing himself the courtesy of a clean resolution. That by morning he would have arrived, through logic and discipline, at the right decision. His phone buzzed. A notification from the building's entry system. Lobby door. 4:07 a.m. He looked at his phone screen. Looked at the timestamp. He stood up. He walked to the hallway, quickly, not running, he didn't run, and pushed open the door to the guest room. The bed. The folded dress. The note on top of it. He picked up the note. Read it once. The 8 words did something to him that 3 hours of board pressure and business calculations had entirely failed to do. They cracked something. Not loudly. Not dramatically. The way the things that actually matter always crack you. Quietly. In the dark. When no one is watching. When there is no performance required and it's just you and the truth of what you almost let walk out the door. He read the note again. "Thank you for pretending I was worth something." He put it down, picked up his phone, and moved. The bus never came. Not because it was late, because Nancy was still standing on the pavement outside the building when the black car pulled up, and the man who got out of it was not a driver. He wasn't in his suit jacket. That was the first thing she noticed. Kwon Seo-jun, who she had never once seen without every piece of his armor perfectly in place, was standing in front of her in his shirt. Sleeves rolled to the forearm. No tie. Like he had left the penthouse with exactly the urgency of a man who did not stop to finish getting dressed. He looked at her. She looked at him. The street was empty. A single streetlight. The smell of rain that still hadn't decided to fall yet. Soul breathing quietly around them like it was trying not to interrupt. "How did you?" "Building notification," he said. "Entry system." She nodded slowly. "Go back inside, Seo-jun." Something moved across his face when she used his name. She had never used it before. Always Mr. Kwon. Always the formal distance. Always the careful boundary that reminded both of them what this was. "Nancy!" "I heard them." Her voice was steady. She had promised herself steady. "In your office." "I wasn't trying to. I just heard. I know what the board said. I know what the right decision is for you, and I'm not going to make it harder by. I haven't made a decision. You said give me tonight. That means by morning you." "I said give me tonight," he repeated. Because I needed to figure out whether I was choosing you because it was right or because I was afraid of losing you. And those are not the same thing, and I needed to know which one it was. Nancy went still. And he looked at her. In the streetlight, with no office and no board and no performance required, his face was different. Not softer, exactly, but open, in the way that things are open when they have stopped defending a perimeter. Both, he said. It's both. And I don't care. She shook her head. The photograph. The board. The Shin woman, they want you to. Park Hyunwoo wants me reactive. He wants me to panic and make a move he can predict. His voice was calm, but underneath it something burned. I've been outmaneuvering Park Hyunwoo for 6 years. I'm not going to let him win by making me send away the one thing in my life that is currently making any sense. I'm a cleaning woman who hid in your car in a stolen dress. I know what you are. Seo Jun. I know, he said again, quieter, exactly what you are. She looked at him. He looked back. The rain made its decision and arrived, lightly, just barely, the first few drops of something that hadn't fully committed yet. It touched her face. His shirt. He didn't move. Come with me, he said. Back to the penthouse. No. He shook his head. Somewhere else first. She got in the car. She told herself she was going to tell him no on the way. She didn't tell him no on the way. She knew where they were going before the car stopped. The mall. Gangnam. Her mall. The one she had mopped floors in for 2 years. The one she had walked through so many times. She knew which lights flickered and which elevator was slow, and exactly how long it took to push a cleaning cart from the service entrance to the bridal boutique on the 3rd floor. It was 4:30 in the morning. The mall was closed. Dark, except for the maintenance lighting, that particular after-hours amber glow that turns familiar places into something slightly dreamlike. Like the same location in a different dimension. Seojun had a key card. She didn't ask how. Some men move through the world with access she will never fully understand, and she had decided sometime in the last 10 days to stop being surprised by it. The boutique was exactly as she'd left it that first night. Racks of white and ivory. The mirrored walls. The soft carpet that had been her job to keep spotless. The chairs where mothers sat and cried happy tears and Nancy had swept around their feet and been invisible. All of it still. All of it dim. And in the display window, the golden dress. She stopped walking when she saw it. It was back on the mannequin, as if it had never left. As if the night in the parking garage and the week in the penthouse and the note on the folded fabric had all been, not a dream exactly, but a parenthesis. A held breath. The dress caught the maintenance lighting and turned it into something it wasn't, warm, amber alive. Nancy looked at it for a long moment. Seo Jun stood beside her. Not touching, just present. The way he had learned, somewhere in the last 10 days, to be present without demanding anything from it. Wear it, he said. She turned to look at him. I don't steal anymore. His jaw tightened. Something moved through his expression, sharp and certain, and underneath it, something far more unguarded than she was used to seeing on his face. I'm not asking you to steal it. His voice dropped. I'm asking you to let me buy it. A pause. The weight of the next word sitting between them like something physical. For the woman I love. The air left her lungs. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Just quietly, like something that had been held in for a very long time and finally understood it was allowed to go. She looked at him. He looked back. No performance. No calculation. No stock price or board vote or quarterly review sitting behind his eyes. Just him. Asking. Go. He said softly, and nodded toward the fitting room corridor. She changed slowly. In the big fitting room. The VIP one. The one with the tall mirror and the good lighting. She took off her clothes, the same clothes she'd packed when she left, the most ordinary things she owned, and she lifted the golden dress off its hanger and stepped into it with the particular reverence of someone handling something that has already once shown them who they are. She zipped it herself, turned to the mirror. It was different this time. She stood there for a long moment trying to understand why, and then she understood. The first time she had worn this dress, the woman in the mirror had surprised her, had appeared like an argument against everything she'd been told about herself, sudden, almost accidental, like a light turning on in a room you'd given up expecting light in. This time, the woman in the mirror was not a surprise. She was just Nancy, standing straight, taking up space, wearing something that fit her the way things fit you when they were always supposed to be yours. Not stolen, not borrowed, chosen. Her eyes didn't fill this time. She just breathed and walked out. He was standing in the center of the boutique. He had his back to her when she came through the fitting room doorway. He was looking at the display window, at the empty mannequin now, the space where the dress had been. She didn't say anything. He heard her anyway. He turned. He went still. Not the controlled stillness of a man managing his reaction. The involuntary stillness of a man whose reaction arrived before he could manage it. He looked at her. The way you look at something when the full weight of almost losing it lands on you all at once, not gradually, not politely, but with the specific force of a realization that doesn't care about your composure. He walked toward her, slowly, not like a CEO, not like the man who had looked at her in a rearview mirror with disgust and made cold calculations about his stock price. Like a man who had, somewhere between a parking garage and a penthouse and a note on a folded dress, lost something he'd spent his entire adult life protecting. His certainty, his distance, his complete and total conviction that he was the one deciding what everything was worth. He stopped, inches away, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating off him, real warmth, not performed, the kind a body produces when it is trying to close a distance it has been maintaining too long. She could feel her own pulse in her throat. "You ran into my car," he said. His voice was low, quiet, the voice he used when he wasn't performing anything for anyone. "You ruined my schedule." His hand moved, just his fingers, the backs of them, barely, brushing the side of her waist through the gold fabric. Not a grip, not a claim, a question. Her breath caught. "You destroyed my peace." His palm settled at the small of her back, flat and firm and certain, not forceful, claiming. The distinction, she would think later, was everything. One asked nothing of her. The other simply decided, not for her, about him, about where his hand belonged and how long it had been waiting to be there. She felt it move through her from the point of contact outward like heat from a surface that has been in the sun all day and finally touches you. "And I have never," he said, "wanted anything more." The boutique was very quiet. No cameras, no board, no carefully constructed lie between them. Just the dim amber light and the golden dress and the city sleeping outside the window and the full, accumulated weight of everything they had been to each other in 10 days. Adversaries, strangers, reluctant allies, something else, something neither of them had named yet, but both of them had felt shift in the dark of his living room when she'd said for 5 minutes I didn't feel invisible, and he had not looked away. Nancy looked up at him. "Are you still pretending?" His forehead came down to hers. That slow, deliberate descent, the most intimate thing, she thought, a person who controls everything can do. To lower themselves, to choose to be level with someone. His eyes stayed open. So did hers. "If I kiss you," he said, and his voice was barely above a breath, "it won't be part of the deal." She could feel the warmth of his mouth without it touching her yet. That specific, unbearable distance of almost. Her fingers found his shirt, gripped it, not pulling, just holding. The way you hold something when you're deciding whether to trust the ground beneath your feet. "Then stop dealing," she whispered. He kissed her, slow, so deliberately slow that it should have felt restrained and instead felt like the opposite, like a man who has been exercising the most expensive kind of control for so long that when he finally lets it go, the release is weight. His hand at her back drew her in. Not rushed, not urgent in the frantic way, urgent in the way of someone who knows exactly what they want and is no longer interested in pretending otherwise. She felt the warmth of his chest through the thin fabric of his shirt. Her hands moved, up from the grip on his shirt, slowly, the way you move when you're paying attention to every inch of what's happening, when you want to be present for every second of the thing you thought you were going to lose. His other hand came up, found the side of her face. His thumb, the same thumb that had brushed her cheek in a gesture she'd been trying not to think about for 4 days, traced the line of her cheekbone like he was learning it, like he intended to know it. When he pulled back, they were both breathing differently. The air between them charged in the way that air gets when something irreversible has happened, and both people know it, and neither of them is moving away. His forehead returned to hers. The gold of the dress caught the light between them. "Marry me," he said. Not loud, not performed. The quietest version of the most serious thing. Not for reputation. His thumb traced her cheek again, slower this time. "For the way you looked at yourself in this dress." He paused. "For the way you made me feel." She kissed him before he finished, because she had spent enough of her life waiting for people to complete their sentences about her, and she was done waiting, and she knew, in the way you know things that live below thought, that whatever he was about to say was true, and she didn't need the words because she already had him. He made a sound low in his throat, surprise and satisfaction, and something that wasn't either of those things. His arm wrapped around her fully, pulling her flush against him, the golden dress pressing between them, and this time there was nothing measured about it, nothing careful or calculated or controlled. Just a man and a woman in a dark boutique at 4 a.m, finally done pretending that this was anything other than what it was. Her fingers slid into his hair. His grip tightened. Not desperate. Sure, the way he did everything, with absolute certainty. Except now the certainty wasn't about stock prices or quarterly reviews or the correct management of his image. It was about her. Just her. Only her. When they finally broke apart, the rain outside had stopped. The city beyond the boutique windows was doing its quiet pre-dawn breathing, that brief hour when Seoul almost sounds like somewhere you could stand still. Nancy rested her forehead on his shoulder. His hand moved slowly up her back, tracing the beading on the golden dress the way she had traced it herself, alone, on a night that felt like it belonged to someone else's life. "The board," she said quietly. "I'll handle the board. Park Hyunwoo." "We'll find out," Seo-jun said. That the most expensive mistake of his career was thinking I would make a fear-based decision. She felt his voice in his chest more than she heard it. "And the boutique." He pulled back, just enough to look at her. "The dress is already paid for." She blinked. "When?" "Yesterday." The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. She suspected full smiles were something he saved for rare occasions, and she was already looking forward to earning them. "Before I knew what I was going to do with it." "You bought it before you decided." "I decided," he said, "when I read your note." She looked up at him. "8 words," she said. "8 words," he confirmed. She shook her head slowly. "You're a very strange man, Kwon Seo-jun. You hid in my car in a stolen dress." "It wasn't." "I know." He tucked a piece of her hair back. Slow and deliberate and completely without self-consciousness, the way he did everything once he decided. It wasn't stolen. It was always yours. The lights of the city started their slow shift from night to the first gray suggestion of morning. They stayed in the boutique a little longer. In the quiet, in the dim gold light, a cleaning girl from Lagos and the most powerful Korean CEO in Seoul, standing in the space where she used to mop the floors in silence, and the distance between those two facts was exactly the length of one terrible night and one golden dress, and every small, unguarded moment in between. She didn't feel invisible. She hadn't, she realized, since the night he'd turned to face her fully on his couch and given her the one thing no one had in a very long time. His complete, undivided attention. "Take me home," she said. He looked at her, and she looked back and she meant it. Not to the apartment in Itaewon, not to the careful small life she had been living since she arrived in the city. She meant his home, their home. He understood. He always understood. "Yes," he said. And she took his hand. Outside, Seoul was waking up. The first buses, the first lights, the city beginning again the way it always did, without asking anyone's permission, without waiting for anyone to be ready. Nancy walked out of the boutique in a golden dress at 5 a.m. with her hand in the hand of a man who had looked at her with disgust in a rear-view mirror 2 weeks ago and had not yet recovered from her. She was not invisible. She was not small. She was not the woman who apologized for standing near a coffee machine. She was the woman in the golden dress. The one who had always been there, waiting, underneath everything, to be chosen. She had been worth something all along. She just needed the right mirror to show her.